We are here with Richard Mattingley. He is our coach success manager at Forte. And Richard and I got to meet in person for the first time a few months back in Utah. And we had some really interesting conversations surrounding the idea of mental fitness and some of the science behind it. And I thought, let's have a conversation online so that you, the listener, can learn more about what Forte is all about, and that is mental fitness. So before we dive in, can you share who you are, what you do as the coach success manager at Forte, and maybe what drew you into this work around mental fitness in the first place?
Yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, it's really good to be with you today, John. As you said, we got to hang together in person in Utah, and we got to talk about the real stuff of life, stuff we were going through, navigating work and life and all those things. And it was just a really awesome conversation. So I've been looking forward to this as kind of part two, and to be able to bring the members of Forte and the customers of Forte into the fold with us as we're all navigating similar things in our life. And from a personal standpoint, about me, so I have the privilege of overseeing our coach team. And we've got 24 awesome coaches from a bunch of different backgrounds that work directly with our members. So I've got a heart for walking alongside those who are walking alongside others. So knowing that that's a difficult role to carry, to be in the trenches with people within the highs and lows of their life. So I get to be in the trenches with those people, which is a really special and unique opportunity that I get. So yeah, that's a little bit about what I do at Forte, and what drew me to joining the Forte team in general is just this idea that we can meet people through partnership with people's companies. We can meet people where they're at, whether they're struggling or whether they're healthy and just looking to grow. And we can provide really accessible care, and that things don't have to get really bad to go and connect with someone who can be a positive, supportive relationship with you. But what an awesome opportunity to say, hey, through your employer, connect, start talking about what's going on, whether it's hard stuff or good stuff. So yeah, that's why I'm here. I really just believe in meeting people in that space accessibly.
Yeah, and I think that's what sets us apart as a company. The idea of mental fitness is not reactive, it's proactive. And the whole idea is like you're going to the gym, you're trying to stay healthy before you need the doctor, or before you need physical therapy or whatever it is. Because I think it's so often a negative that we wait until we're broken. And one of the things that I've put in a couple of the videos is you're not broken, you're becoming. It's this gradual process. And I think within mental fitness, we have these different frameworks, these different pillars, whatever we want to call them. One of them is called mental composition. And that's a term that most people are like, I don't know what that means. So can you give us kind of a rundown of what that phrase could mean? And when we talk about mental composition, what are we actually discussing here?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one way that we like to kind of explain that internally is that mental composition is your inner climate, just your mix of thoughts and emotions. And thoughts and emotions are just these big building blocks for how we experience life. They're not good, they're not bad, they are. They're how we interact with the world, with ourselves, and interpersonally with one another. And as we start to pay attention to our mental composition, all of us went through a developmental process that kind of got us here. But in the present moment, we can start to pay attention to, wow, okay, what is my mix of thoughts and emotions as I go to work, as I'm home with my family, as I'm moving through life? And it really, those are the building blocks for how we interact with ourselves and with the world.
Yeah. It's interesting you say, we've had these things in the past that have got us here. And I think what's cool about mental fitness, and I've caught myself, and even with my wife today, of being like, hey, how are you doing mentally? What's the mental rep, like we call it, that we need to do in this moment? Because candidly, she spilled a bunch of paint on our front porch, like right before I was supposed to meet with you. And so it was like this mad dash to take care of it. And you could tell it was just like frustrating her. So we just took a moment. I gave her a hug and we took a breath. And I think that that's the kind of stuff that mental fitness can teach you, is the stuff like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that before. It would have just stressed me out. But now I have this idea of, in this moment, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? And how do I handle that better? Now, you said before that emotions act like signals, and are like thoughts. Our thoughts are telling stories, And that's a powerful distinction. So, can you unpack that a bit? How do emotions and thoughts work together to shape how we experience life and how to respond to it?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So I will caveat here that there's people who are much smarter than I, and I'm drawing from some of the people I want to reference here. That I'm drawing from are Kurt Thompson and Daniel Siegel specifically, and they focus on interpersonal neurobiology.
Okay.
So I'm going to draw from a little bit of their work, but to share specifically kind of around how we can think of emotions from a simple standpoint and how we can think of thoughts. So emotions we can think of as signals that are gearing us into action, and they're getting us to do something. As we sense, as we move through the world. So one way to think about it is that we sense before we make sense. So we are sensing in our environment, and we've been doing this since we were in the womb. We're sensing with our five senses, like what's going on around us. We've got basically a signal out all the time, and we're paying attention to our environment. And our emotions are a response to our environment, and they're telling us to do certain things. So, fear is telling us to either fight or run away. Sadness is saying, hey, seek comfort. There's something you're going through. Seek comfort. Joy, it leads us to share. When I was just thinking this morning, I was listening to a song I really liked on the way to work, and I just wanted to send it to a friend. It's like you naturally kind of want to share those experiences with people. Disgust is kind of like, man, like get away. I'm repulsed by that experience. Guilt, which sometimes can be this mixed thing, it's difficult to sort through. And again, these are kind of like blanket analogies, but guilt can sometimes lead us to like, oh, that wasn't okay. I need to repair. I need to repair what just took place. And it can actually lead you back into connection. So each of our emotions has what you could call an action tendency. So as we're sensing in the world, our emotions are then leading us into action to respond to our environment. And it's to stay safe and to stay connected. Those are big human needs that we're after on a daily basis. So that's emotions. I can keep going into thoughts, or would it be helpful to pause there?
No, let's shift into thoughts. This is fascinating stuff, and I love already what we're talking about. I think it gives a framework, and it makes things make a whole lot more sense. Like when I'm feeling this way, why does it lead me to want to do this thing? So we're talking about emotions. Now let's shift into thoughts.
Yes. Okay. So from a developmental perspective, we're sensing and then we're making sense. And we first are relating to the world as kids growing up from an emotional lens. That's our right brain. As we mature, our prefrontal cortex continues to develop, and not until our mid-20s is it fully developed, but that you could think of as that's your like executive functioning, and that is where your thought life is beginning to take place and is I guess you could think of it as maturing. And so thoughts happen after emotions from a developmental perspective.
Interesting.
So we're feeling things, and then we're starting to make sense of them.
Yeah.
So we interact with the world, we sense things through our five senses, we have an emotional response, and then here's the key: our emotions are general, and our thoughts are where we make sense of our emotions. So the reality is that if let me think of an example. If I'm driving down the freeway and someone cuts me off, and I feel this emotional surge of anger, and I want to respond by ramming my car into this person or taking ownership of the situation, that's a general emotional response. And the thoughts are my most sophisticated, mature way of regulating that emotion and making sense of what happened. So my thoughts might go, oh, wait, that's not actually going to be helpful. And let me make sense of this experience. Maybe that person was having a really hard day, and I've actually done similar things myself. I've driven poorly myself. So thoughts kind of become the story that you're telling about your felt experience. And it's what makes us distinctly human. We tell stories. So it's a way for us to kind of make sense of our world. And oftentimes when we find ourselves as adults, we find, oh man, my thought life isn't actually very helpful, healthy, or accurate
Yeah.
because I haven't spent a lot of time learning how to make sense of my emotions.
Oh, okay.
And that's kind of where, bringing us to mental fitness, a lot of our work is to say, okay, let's start actually paying attention to our emotional life and our thought life and seeing how they're connected and starting to make sense of our experience in a way that we can grow and become who we're made to be.
Yeah, that is amazing. And as a parent, it really puts things into perspective for your children that they haven't developed that thought life like you're talking about. It's purely based in emotions. So when they're having temper tantrums or throwing fits, as an adult, you're like, why can't you just process this? Why does it have to come out that way? But I know some adults who do that too, So it is interesting how if you haven't developed the way you're supposed to with your thoughts and everything, the same person who's in a road rage incident might react emotionally without even thinking about it because they don't have the composition, they don't have the fitness to train themselves to take a breath, to pause, which is one of our pacer elements, pause, and then think about what you're doing before you react. And so we're talking about how these thoughts and emotions make up our inner world, but I'm curious other things that might influence that. So like, what are the main factors that shape someone's mental composition, like memory, biology, even environment? And how do those pieces interact with each other?
Yes. And those things, the things you mentioned, I think those are great buckets to kind of talk through while they're all very interconnected. So we'll just scratch the surface here, but talking about the first one, so memory is certainly impacting how we experience the present moment. And really two types of memory. So explicit memory and implicit memory. Okay. Explicit is our conscious recall of facts, of memories. And I'm going to use a kind of a personal story to share how memory impacts us. So mid-COVID, I lost my job unexpectedly. I was at a big Fortune 500 company, and 8 months into this new job that I was just sinking my teeth into with everything I had, they do a round of layoffs, and I get an unexpected phone call that like, hey, you're let go. And now, fast forward, current day, as I'm relatively new here to the Forte team, I have this memory, and it's an explicit memory, that I was let go. And there's this underlying sense that there's this association that I have with work because of my experiences of like, oh, I kind of have to be on guard. And that sense of feeling like, okay, I got to be on guard, that's anxiety. Yeah. That's a little bit of the fear action tendency of saying, hey, work is important. You better be a little bit on guard so you don't lose your job because it's important for your family. It's important for all these reasons. So in some ways, it's actually, anxiety is actually doing its job, right? It's saying like, this matters. Be on guard, pay attention. But if I'm not careful, it turns into rumination and it's not actually justified because my current employee situation is it's much different than my last. So I have this memory, I have this association. So that's an explicit memory. Now, implicit, these aren't like facts or memories that we're recalling, and they take place more in our early development. But you could think of them as like body memory or like emotion memory, where let's say, like, for example, and again, this is very personal for me to share, but my parents' house burned down when I was 2. I don't have any memory of that. But do I, after having done my own work, kind of feel like in some ways that body memory and emotional memory is there, and that there's this like part of me that's trying to make sure that situations feel secure.
Yeah.
Even if I don't actually recall that, but that's like a deep part of my story. Yeah. That's your implicit memory. You've got, and attachment theory, if you're interested in this type of thing, it basically validates this from a science perspective, but it's the way in which we go through experiences early on in the context of relationship, like really shapes us when we're older. So as we're now bringing it back to mental composition, when you're interacting with any moment in the present, you're carrying with you your whole story, both implicitly the things that you don't recall, and explicitly the memories that you have. And I think why that's important is because it allows us to have a lot of grace and just a lot of empathy for how we find ourselves here.
Yep.
And like you said in the beginning, we're not broken, we're becoming.
Yeah.
And it kind of is like, oh yes, I have a story.
Yep.
And here I am finding myself here in this present moment. And my role isn't to beat myself up for experiencing anxiety as it relates to work. My role is to slow down, pause, reconnect with this present moment, and realize, like, oh wait, thank you, anxiety. You're trying to keep me safe, trying to make sure that I keep my job. But I'm going to actually let you off duty for a little bit, because as I assess the situation with my thoughts, with my prefrontal cortex, I can recognize that I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, I am safe. This isn't my last job. This is new, and I can engage and be present and not need to. The narrative is now different. So is that's from the memory standpoint. I'll pause there.
Yeah. It's making me think we have a similar, take on memory in this sense, because my past jobs, I didn't get a lot of affirmation. In fact, there was kind of this inherent, like, prove yourself mentality, and it's messed with me since. And it's interesting coming into an organization like Forte. Our CEO, Vineet, is an amazing man and has an amazing background and story and why he started this company. But he's very pointed about how he treats each employee. And one of the things that he does really well with me is words of affirmation. And the negative side of that for me is, like, I'm constantly feeling like I have to prove myself. But he's constantly affirming. And so I'm like, oh, I'm stable here. This is good. I don't have to prove myself, but I want to, because he's giving me that affirmation. And then we talked about this in Utah with my son. He had a really rough birth and came a month early and was in the NICU, and his implicit memory I see as a 4-year-old already, because he struggles with separation from his mom, because they weren't allowed to be together for the first 5 days of his life, because it was during COVID. So she was in the hospital under lockdown, and he was in the NICU in 3 to 4 cities away. And so there was like this odd thing our first year where he did not want me to put him to bed. And still to this day, he prefers mom to put him to bed. He'll let me know. But it's interesting, again, what mental fitness can do is it trains you to analyze this. And why am I feeling this way? Why is he feeling this way? And what can we do with our mental composition to train ourselves to not let it become a negative, to let it be something we can look at and be like, oh, I see what's happening and I understand this. So I love that thought. And if we want to dig into the biology and environment, we can, or we can move forward. It's up to you.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to kind of continue on that. I mean, just a quick nod to those categories of, our genetics certainly play a role in how we interact with the world. There's a whole field called epigenetics that basically says you have a certain gene and the environment can turn on the expression of your genes.
I've never heard that.
I won't be able to go into it. I'm not. That's not a field that I've really studied, but it's this interesting idea that our nature and nurture, they're both taking place as we experience the world, and that's just a field of study that's kind of proving it. It's saying like, hey, there's a certain set of genes that you've been handed. There are certain mental disorders that people can trace through family lines, and our environment what can turn them on. The stress in our environment can turn on things. So I think it's just important, again, to just recognize kind of the complexity of how we experience our thoughts and emotions, and that's a big factor. And then environment and memory are just so interconnected. Essentially, our environment is where our memory took place. But I think one way to think about environment is not just in the past, but in the present. Because like, for example, we might be thinking about, okay, I might be experiencing anxiety in connection to work because of some of the experiences I've been to. But for a different person, their environment in connection with work might legitimately just, there might be legitimate fear and anxiety connected to losing their job because of social factors that they cannot control. And in that case, it's like, it doesn't make sense to beat yourself up or try and talk yourself out of that anxiety. It's like, okay, a lot of political turmoil going on. I might lose my job. That doesn't have to do with what you've been through. That has to do with what you're going through now, which is the environment and the world we find ourselves in, which has a lot going on. So I think it's also important to give kind of a nod to that, to be like, yeah, that's a big thing too. It's not just what you went through, it's what you're going through now, and just the realities of our uncertain world that we're in.
Yeah. And so when we talk about those three different things of memory and environment and what was the other one?
Like genetics.
Yes, genetics. It's easy, I think, for us to be like, well, that's just who I am, and get stuck in that negative loop. And I've been there myself. I've struggled with depression and anxiety. And it's when you get locked in on this cycle of negative thinking, it is very difficult to get yourself out. And fortunately for me, I have an amazing wife who recognized it and asked me to get help, and I did. But what are some things that we can do to train our mind and body when we're stuck in that negative cycle?
Yeah, I think you're naming kind of one of the delicate pieces of our current cultural moment, is that we're becoming more aware of why it is we struggle in the present. And oftentimes that awareness, what a byproduct, an accidental byproduct, is that that's all that we focus on. And we start thinking about like simply what's gone wrong, the people that have wounded us, the things that were out of our control, and it becomes the focal point of our present experience. And like you said, it can actually kind of be a negative reinforcement. And you're just continuing to activate the same neural pathways of those experiences in the present moment. So what I think's really cool about mental fitness, and again, healing from difficult things. What I don't want to say is that going through traumatic things, healing from difficult things is this simple, hey, just be positive in the present moment. It's not that. It can be more complex. Every person's story is unique. But in general, we all have the capacity in the present moment to redirect and to pay attention to the whole story. So oftentimes what we get caught in is just a part of the story of what went wrong. And it can kind of evaporate our sense of hope that there's actually other pathways possible moving forward. But we do have capacity just as humans to direct our attention. And it's this powerful tool we have to reframe, to see beauty from ashes, to acknowledge the hard thing that we've gone through, and to not just bypass it, but to simultaneously see how I'm growing through it, and how, for example, for me, I've struggled with my own mental health in many ways, but I'm just so grateful that now I get to be here and use my role as an opportunity to see the redemptive fruit of this journey. And those are some of the things that we do. That's kind of from a story perspective, from an like emotional perspective, just kind of recognizing that we sense before we make sense. So we can become emotionally hijacked really quickly. To give yourself grace for that, you're here, you're finding yourself in that way for a moment, but then to recognize, okay, I actually do have agency to pause, to name. Daniel Siegel says, name it to tame it, to name the emotions I'm experiencing, which actually helps them go from this thing that feels completely out of my control that's dominating me to like, oh, I have a sense of what's going on here. now, and to begin to respond to your life rather than simply react to it. Does that kind of make sense? I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, it definitely does. And you used a word as you were talking through that kind of leads us into our next section. You said, I'm grateful to be here, to be able to help people process these emotions and everything. And so we talk about this negative side of things, this negative thinking, but there's this opposite side of gratitude and gratefulness. And it's really fun if you're part of the Forte organization to talk to the different people who are on our staff, because that is a word that's used over and over. I'm just grateful to be here because we see that we're making a difference in people's lives. And I'm curious, as we look at negative, and not the opposition, but a difference of gratefulness, how does that impact the mind? What does gratitude do? And joy and appreciation, how does that impact our mental and emotional health? Can you kind of juxtapose those two things?
Yeah, definitely. So I think when it comes to positive emotion, I'll cite here Broaden and Build Theory by Barbara Fredrickson. And when you think about your life and you think about moments where negative emotion comes online, so I'll kind of keep drawing it back to me at work. When anxiety is the emotion that is, when I'm working from a place of fear, it's almost as if I'm kind of in a survival mode. Yeah. And when I'm in that survival mode, I'm not working in an integrated space. So my whole brain is not online. My heart rate will be elevated. I might potentially feel even like tension in my arms. And what I'm doing is I'm not accessing my full capacity to be creative, to relate, to think through things in an open and calm way. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of like, I'm operating in fear to keep myself safe. And positive emotions do the opposite. So when I can focus on what I'm grateful for, or we've talked a lot about, we sense before we make sense. So if you engage your senses to reconnect with your present moment, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. And you kind of remind yourself that, oh, wait, I don't actually need to be in survival mode right now. Like, I'm here. Yeah. I'm safe. I'm connected. Yeah. Thinking about 3 things you're grateful for. All of a sudden, your full capacity comes back online. Your mental composition shifts. We talked about mental composition as inner climate. So we all have this climate. You could think of your climate as like the totality of your entire developmental experience, your memory, your genetics, all of that. But every climate has weather. Yeah. And we can shift our weather when we're focusing on things we're grateful for, when we're engaging our senses. And all of a sudden, our capacity to be creative, to relate, to think things from a different perspective, drastically changes. Yeah. Your heart rate goes down. You can feel it in your body. And that builds upon itself. Earlier, we talked about how the negative cycle builds upon itself. So does the positive cycle. And from a neuroscience perspective, you're creating new pathways. Associated, for me, creating new pathways associated with work that are increasingly positive and increasingly associated with joy and feeling a sense of belonging. And that's going to change. That's going to compound upon itself, which is the beautiful thing about neuroplasticity, is that we have the ability to change. Our brain is developing rapidly when we're little, but it doesn't mean that it ends. Like, as adults, we neuroplasticity is experience dependent. So as we have experiences in the present, it shapes our neural pathways. Yeah.
This is reminding me a lot of kind of a phrase that we've coined in the last few months of drift versus drive. This idea of autopilot. You talked about operating in fear and kind of survival. You could also say autopilot is this idea of drift, where we just feel like I don't know what my center is. I don't feel like I'm supposed to feel, but I don't know why. And then the opposite side of things of drive, where you're in the driver's seat and you feel good and you feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm locked in. And I think what you're talking about is within those two elements. And that's a lot of what mental fitness is for those people who might feel like I'm drifting. I'm just not really sure. And I would like to drive. It's this aspirational moving towards something. And sometimes there is pain. Sometimes there is burnout. Sometimes there is stuff. But other times it's just a drift. Like I'm not burned out. I just don't feel like I'm supposed to. So how do you describe the difference? I know I just described it a little bit, but how can someone tell when they're drifting versus driving in their own life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like there's two ways to think about how we kind of respond to uncertainty, respond to life's pain, whether it's overt, capital T trauma, or just that life is life.
Yeah.
And control and avoidance, control and escape are kind of two big camps that kind of take place as we move through life. And control will feel sometimes like drive, but there's a difference between a high energy negative state or hyper arousal and a high energy positive state. So the person who's experiencing a lot of burnout, a lot of anxiety is in hyper arousal. They're in this high energy negative state, potentially characterized by a lot of anxiety, that is driving them forward, but it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
And someone who's potentially a little bit more of an avoidant, dissociative, escape-oriented person that doesn't move into anxiety to deal with, to respond to all that life demands of us, but moves into a little bit of like more of a, I'm going to distance myself from this to actually keep myself a little bit safe and to insulate in some ways. But we're kind of actually turning off, we're numbing our experience a little bit. And those people might be experiencing what feels more like drift. Where it's like, oh, like my sense of purpose isn't there. I don't feel motivated. And when they dig into those emotions, there might be something that they're avoiding. So again, these are kind of generalizations. Everyone's story is unique and complicated. But those are kind of, does that resonate? Those kind of camps?
Totally. The last thing that you were talking about of escapism, you see this Hobbiton poster behind me. My wife always knows when I'm struggling because I'm like, we should watch Lord of the Rings, or I'll watch it on my own. Like I like to escape into that reality sometimes of the peace of the Shire and the music. And I love those movies. So I resonate with that. And I'm sure there are a lot of other people who resonate with different aspects of that. But I am curious as we wrap up our conversation, if we were to wrap up mental composition and what we're talking about, what's a mental rep that someone could do today to help their mental composition and strengthen their mental fitness?
Yeah, absolutely. Can I give two? Is that? I guess they're kind of connected.
Yeah.
I guess they're kind of connected. Okay, so sometimes talking about thoughts and emotions, it can feel so complex, right? So I'm gonna use an analogy that might hopefully give someone some handles to grab onto. So when you're searching on like Redfin or Zillow, and it's giving you the price of a home, and you're like, okay, I think that's what that home is worth, based on Redfin's quick estimate. And then you go and you work with your real estate agent, and you check out the house, and you get a little bit more information. You're curious, you're exploring, you're like, okay, how's this neighborhood? How's the bones? Oh, those photos on Redfin, they definitely oversold this. Like, this isn't as valuable as I thought. So you're starting to get curious about the actual value.
Yeah.
And then let's say you put an offer on it, which I hope to do one day. I live in California, so it's really expensive. So hopefully one day. But you get a little bit closer and you actually have an inspection take place. And then you're seeing the undercurrent of the whole house.
Yep.
You're seeing the plumbing, you're seeing the electricity. And all of a sudden it's like, this house is not worth nearly as much as I thought.
Yeah.
Because of all of these issues. And you're doing a reappraisal. And the reappraisal is, we thought it was this, but here's the whole story of what's going on, which allows you to then make a decision and move forward. Yeah. And I think sometimes our emotions and our thoughts can be like that. Every day, we're in our environment and we are looking at Redfin and we're experiencing emotions and we're making these quick decisions constantly. One way to say this is that we're reacting. We're just reacting. And slowing mental fitness can look like a reappraisal. It can look like getting curious, pausing, inspecting the reality of the situation. Oh, what emotions am I experiencing? What's the story I'm telling myself about this? And as you begin to pause, to slow down, and then to reappraise, you can actually have a sense of clarity. And I will say that that's what it looks like within our coaching sessions. Is their goal is to just ask questions and to come alongside you as a calm presence for you to go through kind of that reappraisal process of like, oh, what am I actually experiencing? Can I slow down to respond rather than react to life, to live in alignment with my values? And to tie it back to one personal note of what this looks like for me, because I've talked about work continually throughout this. So when I'm driving to work every day, it's really important for me to go through that because otherwise, if I'm on autopilot, I'm going to live off those old memories of anxiety. And on my way to work, I take the long way in, and there's this spot going past this beach. I live in Carlsbad. Beach is called Dip in the Road, and it's literally just because there's a dip in the road. And there's like this old kind of like frontage road off the main road. And I just pull to the side, and it's like kind of hidden, and I am able to look at the ocean, and I just stop for like 5 minutes. And I look and I just gaze at like the beauty of the ocean. And I just kind of remember like, oh yeah, this is new. This is not what I was at. That fear isn't really justified anymore. Like here, I can be present. I can trust in this moment. And it's just kind of like a daily practice. And that's what mental fitness can look like. It can be the quick 5-minute stop. It can be like the breath before going into a meeting or talking to a family member. So a lot more than one there, and I hope it's not too confusing, but there's some different things.
No, I think if we were to kind of put a bow on that, it's essentially pause and reflect. Pause and reflect on your life. Take a breath, think about what's going on. And like you said, appraise your life and appraise your mental fitness and see where you're at. And that's healthy for everyone. Whether you're drifting, driving, burned out, doing great, whatever it is, that is a healthy thing to do. And that's what we're all about at Forte is helping you have that mental fitness so that you can remain healthy or become healthy. And so I appreciate your time, Richard, and I appreciate everybody who's watching today. And hopefully this encouraged you and gave you some insight into mental fitness, mental composition, what we're about at Forte. I know it did for me as an employee of Forte. So appreciate your time. And we're going to keep doing these, and I hope that you'll tune in. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Really, really good getting to be with you and sharing each other's life story a little bit and talk about what it looks like to become who we're made to be.
Definitely.
Appreciate it.
Yep.